They have a $15 minimum, so we got back to Bay engraving.
Oh, yeah.
So the first time I wore this, I've been at the WPPA, not the WPPA, but the National Sports Association meeting years ago. So brand new. And a lady walks up, she works for the National Board. She walks up, she goes, I really like the it's $7. You see it from clear across the room. I just had to come over and tell you.
Those guys come up to the goal and you kind of look in the back and they roll that out.
Someone went to a whole lot of work.
They ain't gravy.
I just want something with some contrast.
I'll stick them in goal one for the year and a half I got.
I have like 4 or 5 now. I lose them when they're fine.
Well, sure better than a stick on it when you go to the media.
What's this petition for? We just
That's the road.
Yeah.
We do have PowerPoints, but let's go with the
Did he restore it?
So
You're gonna let us know.
yeah. Get some.
But they're in extra time.
You get one too? Oh.
So it looks like we're all ready. 3 o'clock, close enough. And so we're going to officially close our executive session and open our regular session, starting with, do I have notes? There it is. Our public comments, but before that, I'd like to say today is July 1st. It's Tuesday, and all 3 commissioners are present. And let's go with our public comment. Can you hear me now? Is that better? And, oh, Lynn, Miss Bellinger, you're the only one that signed up for public comment.
Sounds kind of muffled.
Anything you want to say?
I would just like to, you all know that I got together this petition to get the potholes fixed on Roder. I'd like a date, please. They're always full of water, and people in cars and trucks have to go on the other side of the road to avoid the potholes that are increasing in size. So.
They've got to be paved. That's,
What?
they've got to be paved. I know they were filled in with gravel because I complained a couple of times and they got filled up and in a very short time it's gone.
Yes, evidently somebody at the plywood company fills them occasionally, but within a week they're all.
Yeah, it's a mess. It really is.
So we are looking at that right now. Is that, Fred? You got any ideas on rough time frame?
First of all, I'd like to remind everybody that it's a private road. It's a driveway. It's not a public road. It's not built to public road standards.
And when you say private, mean it's public?
Means it belongs to the port.
Port of Bellingham,
It's-
right?
It's the Port of Bellingham, and so it's over the years it's turned into a main arterial for the community. So we're going to stripe it this year, and we'll look at some of the pothole repairs as well. But the long-term solution, I believe, is a reconstruction of the entire road to meet city standards.
And in the meantime, we'll just maintain it?
We'll just
fill
maintain.
them-
That's
fill
what
the
we've been doing.
potholes?
That's what we've
Okay.
been
Yeah,
doing.
it's not even
Okay.
2-lane the way it is. It's
It's not, no, it's not
Yep.
2 lanes. It's
take your
hardly
life in
even
your
one.
hands some days.
Because you have a drop off on the others, on the
Right.
port side, and you have the potholes on the other
Mhm.
side. But it's clearly caused by water draining off of that hill. But the port road parallels the train track,
Mhm.
and then the city owns the uphill part of it.
Seaview, that's
The
right.
seating
Right.
portion,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, do you have any,
This summer, we'll be doing it this summer. We just awarded a contract here a few weeks ago at the last meeting, so we'll be looking at it this summer to do the pothole repairs and restripe our road.
Yeah, I would imagine maybe next year, so it's like a capital
How about
project, right,
just a little
for a reconstruction?
surfacing?
Well, I think the reconstruction is a very complex problem. There's issues with right-of-way, the slope, the drainage of the railroad. You know, there's a railroad on both sides. The main line is on the one side, so there really needs to be maybe a solution with working with the city
Mhm.
on how that's going
So-
to happen. And then also the road is part of it's in the city and part of it's in the county.
I saw
So
a furniture truck going up Seaview today. That's the first time I can remember seeing that.
Yeah.
I happened to be coming down. I said, wow.
There's something, I believe there's like 5,000 cars a day that use that
Thanks.
roadway.
That
Yeah.
warrants something more than a driveway,
Yeah.
so
Is your main concern the potholes right now?
my main concern is the potholes. And the routing of the traffic going around the potholes. You either fall in them or you go on the other side.
And we can take care of that this summer.
All of the potholes?
Well, the potholes that exist.
Thank you, Ms. Bellinger, appreciate it.
What?
Thank you. That's it, it's signed up. Anybody else? Nobody? Nobody? All right. And with that, we will move right into our consent agenda. Diane?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through E.
All right, gentlemen, any discussion about any items?
Oh, No.
Ed? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I believe we are recessing to a public hearing on a Fairhaven Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements. So let's do that, and Greg, you're up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleasure to be here today to present a proposed amendment to the Fairhaven Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements, specifically regarding the Fairhaven shipyard and all-American marine areas. First, I'd like to remind everybody a little bit about our comprehensive scheme planning process, that it's generally at the 20,000 foot level, takes into consideration various industry factors, and is a forecast of potential improvements or disposition of assets or changes in uses. It doesn't carry with it an obligation to actually perform it. It's a communication of our strategic direction of our assets, of what we think we might do with those. And in particularly, the RCW here at the bottom says that before you can construct something, it has to be identified in a comp scheme. And that should be substantially the same when you enter into a construction contract. Let's see here. And then I'll go into what's currently in our Fairhaven comp scheme. We've currently identified repairs to the wooden portion of the pier at the shipyard in the comp scheme. We also identified doing the cleanup of the marine sediments under MODCA. And we also recognized in the current comp scheme that it was general in nature that later on, when certain development projects were identified, we would hold additional public hearings to communicate our vision to the public. In 2010, the Port and Ecology entered into an agreed order that combined both the marine sediments with the upland cleanup. And this figure here just kind of illustrates where some of the bigger deposits of cleanup need to take place. You can see under the pier portion and the vicinity of the marine rail where there are the most of the marine sediment cleanup areas. This slide here shows you where our lease commitments are for the two tenants that occupy the site. The blue area here is All-American Marine. The larger red area is under lease by Puglia or Fairhaven Shipyards. And then there's a smaller area here where the arrow's at that is common area used to access both sites. It also encompasses both port-owned fee simple property as well as state-managed DNR property. So some of the improvements that, or the improvements that we're bringing forward today include rehabilitation and replacement of the marine rail and finger pier at the shipyard, potentially demolition of the Carpenter building and corresponding pier platform, an expansion to the All-American Marine Fabrication building, potentially a demolition of Warehouse 9 and potentially construction of a new building to house shipyard activities, modifying and replacing or relocating the stormwater treatment system, and demolishing various accessory outbuildings as may be determined. And this list is graphically represented on the improvement plan on the next slide. And you should have also gotten an updated map. There was a slight change to the area identified as an opportunity to coordinate with the Maka site cleanup. That changed a little bit.
Is the idea to, excuse me, the idea to put the smaller buildings when they disappear in the future sometime to put those together in a larger one? Is there any thinking that far ahead, or?
Well, I think that is the whole idea about this plan, and it all kind of depends on what is worked out with ecology, with the carpenter shop, and that pier portion. Let me point to it with the arrow. Let's see, here we go. This area here, if this part is demolished and the carpenter shop gets taken away, then these activities possibly could be relocated in a new building over here. And we were thinking that at the same time, to improve access to the marine launching infrastructure, is that we could clean up this yard space here and co-locate them in the same facility over there. And that would also make it a little bit easier to do the environmental cleanup.
Move about and whatever, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and if I could just add, excuse me, real quickly, Commissioners, that all of this is subject to our negotiations with our tenants. So all of that is being discussed with our tenants.
So are there two buildings you're talking about? Warehouse 9 would be demolished. Would you then add a building at Warehouse 9 and the one behind it?
I think, let me go back to this one slide that shows the lease area. If you look at this slide, you can see Warehouse 9 right here, and this is currently occupied by shipyard parking. And it's my understanding that Puglia also uses Warehouse 9 for stores off their ships. So if that was coming down, they would need additional space in a new facility. But the idea would be to put the new facility over here and then relocate the parking where the existing Warehouse 9 was. We need to be a little bit careful on the design of the parking layout. As you can see, this black line is the inner harbor line, and DNR frowns about parking even associated with water-oriented uses on DNR property.
Can you address this parking issue? So the I think is it 800 Harris, where, oh shoot, what's that new building we just rebuilt for Index? Is that 800?
300.
300. Directly behind that, I don't think we can see it on your.
Let's see, I might have an aerial here.
Yeah, see that? So you can see that there's a bit of a triangle in there.
Right.
How far down does, no, up a little bit, I think. Right in there. So how much of that is port owned, do you know?
It's hard to tell off this. If I was looking at an assessor's map, I could be a little more accurate, but I believe it comes down to right about here. There is a small piece of privately owned triangle piece right next to the railroad.
And Shirley, do you know, is that entire parcel leased out to Index?
No, that is owned by Burlington Northern, that little triangle piece.
So no real parking available?
Correct.
Okay.
So let's see. So that was the idea, was to make the yard space more efficient and also to get ready for the cleanup, as well as just, you can imagine, this isn't like the waterfront where there are no tenants yet. You can clean it up and then go develop. You're going to have two businesses there operating while we try to do this. So yeah, the purple shows the new buildings. These are very preliminary, like Shirley said. We've got to see what shakes out with the discussions with the tenants, and also the discussions with ecology on the cleanups. There's that. There's one of the projects was rehabilitation of the existing marine railway and finger pier, or as an alternative, replacing that with the new travel lift pier. The small circle shows you where the stormwater treatment building is and the associated upland storage tanks. I can go on to some of the dollar amounts. First, let me talk about the wooden pier portion. In the original comp scheme of 2008, we had a range of $5 to $15 million. We've since narrowed that down to $7 million. As a part of that $7 million, it includes some bracing and support of the Carpenter building area in that portion of the pier, but doesn't include any demolition or what the outcome of that could be. The Harris Avenue shipyard cleanup in the original plan was, when it was marine sediments only, was estimated at $6 million. That's at 8.2 now when you consider the upland cleanup as well. And there has been some preliminary designs on the expansion of the All-American Marine building. But the other projects still have work to do to figure out the feasibility and cost estimates of those. We do the draft RIFS is expected to be released later this year. There will be additional public comment periods on that. And then we hope to have a consent decree with ecology under MACA in next year, in 2015. And there's an aerial of the site. Mike Stoner and I believe John Hergesheimer, who's the engineer that's worked pretty closely on all these projects, are both here to answer any questions you might have.
Of the 19 million, how much do you anticipate would be the port's cost?
Well, you know, of the 8 on the Harris Avenue shipyard cleanup, I believe half of that is eligible for MICA funds.
Yes, and just to emphasize that, that's our current best estimate for that, but it's going through ecology review right now. The range of alternatives includes alternatives that are less than that and substantially more than that. So this is a planning figure. Of that planning figure, yes, we would expect to get about 50% of that from ecology grant funding. We also have access to contributions from other potentially liable parties at the site.
And then also, I'd like to point out, when we adopt these amendments, and also whether it's a total plan a rewrite. When we do the planning cost estimates, we put a caveat down there at the bottom, and it says it denotes current project cost estimates, not financial responsibility. Projects may include grant funding or third-party funding. During your budget process and when you issue construction contracts, discussions with tenants is when you work out a lot of those details.
So the only new number we're really looking at is the All-American Marine fabrication building. Otherwise, everything else has kind of been floating around out there for a while. Quick question to staff, maybe not you, Greg, is the $7 million. So we've had the $7 million set aside for the pier replacement. Are we still chasing federal dollars for that, or is that sort of that whole effort died? Anybody?
I don't know that I'm not aware that we're chasing federal dollars. That amount is in the budget.
Yeah.
It has been for years, and it's at the $7 million mark, totally paid by the port.
Yeah. I know we talked about it a few years ago, but we haven't really talked about it recently, so I don't know if our legislative folks would be interested in bringing home some bacon. I don't know. Is that what they do? And then as far as the overall changes to our harbor, the scheme of harbor improvements, really not a lot, other than, so we're still doing all the same activities, and still have our shipyard, All-American Marine, really just looking at maybe some new buildings. That's the biggest changes.
That's correct. It's not the point of this public hearing, but other things in the Fairhaven Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements that was left undecided by the Task Force Commission happened to be with the South Side boat launch options and what we were going to do with that. We don't have any new alternatives at this point.
Okay. Got any questions? Anything with you?
Couldn't hear.
No?
I can't, it's hard to hear them.
Oh.
Oh, so anyway, at this point, I would just, if anybody signed up for comment, I would open it up to the public to receive comments.
So do we have any folks here who'd like to make a public comment about this particular item? Scheme of harbor improvements for Fairhaven, some changes?
And I don't think Mr. Turney has any comments, but I do want to welcome Neil Turney, the president of the Fairhaven Shipyard, who's sitting in the back of the room.
All right. Well, with that, we will close that. So that's it? All right. Thank you very much for that. We are now getting back to our regularly scheduled list of events.
What's the score?
Apparently, there's a request on the score. Anybody know what the score
It is 2-1 with about 5 minutes remaining.
is? Who's ahead?
Belgium.
Belgium. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. See how he keeps up on all things important? I love it. Thanks, Ron. All right, so let's move on to our administrative items. I think these should all go pretty quickly today. Hint, hints. And go ahead.
A motion to authorize the executive director to enter into an insurance contract and authorize payment for the renewal of the port's property and crime insurance coverage for the period from July 1, 2014 through July 1, 2015.
Thanks, Diane.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is our annual request to the Commission to authorize the Executive Director to renew our port property and the crime insurance policies for the policy period beginning July 1st, 2014, which is today. Starting with property insurance, while property insurance limits and deductibles have stayed the same as last year, the premiums have increased about 11% due to three factors. One is we went up about $27 million in our statement of values, which is the list of all the properties that are covered by the property insurance. And major additions there were the BLI terminal expansion projects, the land and buildings we acquired as when we did the land swap with the city for Colony Wharf, and the Blaine wave attenuator has been on the asset list, but not on our statement of values over the last few years. So that's about $1.6 million. The main part was the airport expansion that drove the values up. Another big factor in the increase in premiums is that earthquake and fire insurance, flood insurance markets have been really being scrutinized lately, and more attention is being paid to any businesses that are along the Cascadia subduction fault line here in the Northwest. And so that the insurers are paying more attention. It's considered to be a lot more risky than it used to be. So the premiums are going up. That's pretty much how things go around. I think I remember being said that it was getting to be at a point that's about the same as California. So it is considered a fairly good-sized risk these days, and underwriters are kind of avoiding anything they can avoid. So the third increase factor is our 2012 loss record, and that was a really bad year for the port as far as losses are concerned. We had the February 27th boat fire, we had the March 30th boathouse fire at Gate 3, and then in November we had the Alaskan Marine Highway ramp accident. So all those factors combined are working to drive up our premiums by about 11% for this year. Just as a note, Port Bellingham has the largest statement of values of the Northwest Port Association pool, which is a pool we're in for insurance, with the $469 million in assets. The next closest is Vancouver with $310 million. So we're a big piece of that pool. So any more questions on the property value? On the property side?
Just so you're aware, Everett and Seattle are obviously not in that pool.
No,
I'm sorry, Tacoma.
Yeah.
Everett is in there.
And this is for property and crime only, not liability?
Well, what we're discussing now is just property. We'll talk about the crime in a second, and the liability renewal happens in the September-October timeframe.
Thank you.
Any, Jim?
So any more questions on the property side?
No, I think we're good.
Nope.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Okay, the crime insurance used to be renewed during the liability insurance cycle, it didn't in the fall, but it has been changed over the last couple of years to occur now with the rest of the property insurance. And this year, a decision was made to double our crime policy coverage from $1 million to $2 million, with a premium increase from about $1,000 to $1,483. So we're doubling our coverage with a 48% increase in cost. And given some of the things that are, things like employee fraud, forgery, credit card fraud, and wire transfer fraud, these things can add up to a lot of money in this day and age of cyber business. And so we thought that was a much safer way to go, double the coverage with a premium increase of about 48%.
48% though, $400. So for $400, we thought it well worth the extra coverage that we're getting.
And some ports right now are looking at this particular coverage to displace some coverage for personal bonds that we buy now for the director, some of the directors and the controllers and things like that. So we're looking at maybe if we can avoid buying some of those bonds, it would offset some of the increased cost here with a much higher limit on this. And by the way, the deductible on this is zero.
All right.
So any questions on the crime side?
This says $2,500 deductible on crime, and you say zero?
Oh, did I say, I'm wrong then, it must be 2,500. That's correct, 2,500 deductible.
So it isn't zero, it's 25.
It's 2,500.
Thank you.
So we request that you approve the action so that the executive director can find this insurance for us.
All right, anything further?
Okay.
No, good. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, sir. All right. Neil, I know you were going to try to sneak this through on the consent agenda, but we don't see you very often, so I was hoping to see you up front.
I'm sending to you a revised action memo, just a slight change in the front. You'll see where it's highlighted. The action is Commission motion authorizing the executive director to execute the Washington Public Port District Omnibus Mutual Aid Interlocal Agreement, subject to minor revisions.
So Diane just gave you a new action memo to replace the action memo that was in your agenda pack. And the reason for that is the Port of Seattle brought up a couple of things that they want to revisit before we finalize the agreement between the ports. So rather than bringing it back to you 3-4 different times as different ports weigh in on this, we thought we would just have you authorize me to execute this subject to some minor revisions. Neil?
Commissioners, it's my great pleasure to be able to bring this thing to you for your consideration today. I actually began this journey about 8 years ago, and some of these things take time. In this case, this is probably the most legally reviewed document that I think I've ever seen. And it continues to undergo more legal review. Essentially, what you're looking at in this mutual aid agreement is a prearranged set of conditions and terms for lending or borrowing equipment, people, or services among ports. And this has been designed specifically for ports. We have mutual aid agreements are fairly common. Municipalities, counties, fire districts, they use their mutual aid agreements on a daily, if not a weekly basis. It's just part of doing business. But when I got to the port, one of the things I found was that ports didn't have any mutual aid agreements. And I think it had to do with competitiveness. But when I look around and I see the refineries, for instance, there's a very competitive business. But they all have mutual aid agreements because they know that if they get into an emergency or a disaster that exhausts their resources, that they're going to need to rely upon one another. And ports are not much different than that. We have a unique set of circumstances. We have unique language. We have people that have uncommon skills. I can't go into Seattle and just pluck somebody off the street who knows how to run an airport or any of the other kinds of facilities that we have. And so it's important that we have the ability to be able to rely upon one another to be able to augment our own resources and capabilities. And it's particularly important for ports, I think, because we're economic engines. And after a disaster, that economic engine needs to get up and be running as quickly as possible. And the existence of mutual aid agreements can help speed that recovery. At a recent Puget Sound maritime recovery exercise, it was concluded that the number one thing that we could do to improve our recovery capability among the ports was to have a robust mutual aid system in place. And to the best of my knowledge, I only know of one mutual aid agreement throughout the entire state of Washington. This particular agreement has been a collaboration of emergency managers and a variety of employees from ports throughout Puget Sound. I also would be at a disservice if I didn't mention the WPPA, and they've been helping us to collaborate and get this thing to the top of the hill so that we can eventually get it to go down. Also, Matt Morrison and Eric Haldeman at the Pacific Northwest Economic Region have also been instrumental in putting this whole thing together. A couple of things about this particular agreement that I'll bring to your attention. One, it's designed for all ports in the state of Washington, and that's about half the ports in the nation. So if we can get a good, robust plan going with those ports, I think we're going to be well ahead throughout the entire state. Participation is voluntary. If you agree that we should enter into this agreement, then there is nothing binding us to have to loan or borrow equipment, personnel, or services. It's strictly up to us if we choose to do so. And there's no duty to respond.
There's no obligation.
No obligation whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if we were to lend assets, say, to another port, and we all of a sudden decided we needed to have that asset back, the agreement allows that to be returned immediately. There's also conditions in there as to how you take care of equipment. If we loaned a dump truck or an ARF vehicle, for instance, and we wanted to send our own drivers, that's part of that agreement. So there are a lot of things in there about terms and conditions that will allow us to more expeditiously meet a disaster and be able to help one another as ports.
Yeah, it's just an amazing agreement. I read it pretty much word for word and went back a few times, and I just found it that it's fairly common amongst businesses, I guess, but not among ports.
Not among ports, not that I've found. I'm trying to get a movement going.
Yeah, boy, it's interesting.
Anything, Dan?
No, I was just trying to think of some of the examples that you would do. Do you have some examples, Neil?
Well, not long ago, I was requested to go down to the OSO, or the Snohomish County Emergency Operations Center to work on the OSO incident. We had the 2012 boat fire, and in that structure that we developed to be able to respond to that incident, I needed planning section chiefs. It's a very specific position within the structure. And we went through 6 of them, and one of those came from Skagit County. But there are other kinds of things, and I think in particular, when I look at, for instance, our airport operations specialists, that's a pretty unique job. And if we were to have a significant loss of those personnel, we could be able to take the mutual aid agreement and perhaps augment that with other people who are similarly skilled at another port.
So you think of it more in terms of personnel than equipment?
Either way, it depends upon what you need at that point in time. And it's hard to foresee which is going to be the most useful. I think that we did think a lot about personnel when we put this thing together. So.
Yet if they if they don't want to be involved, they don't have to be involved.
Right.
They can just say, sorry. Yep. That was kind of surprised me. Yep. That obligation thing is kind of amazing.
Yep.
Well, Neil, I watched what happened with our boat fire, and that actually got me more interested in understanding not just sort of the the higher level of what you do, but the down on the ground level of what you do, which I didn't understand before. And it's interesting that just a mutual aid agreement can really kickstart, I mean, because really it's just an agreement, right? But it really, I think it kickstarts the process to get people together more often and collaborate in a way that you guys weren't really doing before. So it's a weird thing, because sometimes I look at the budget, I'm like, oh, we spend that much on training, really? But it reminds me of my days in the Marine Corps, where that's all we did was train, and then when something happened, we were always ready for it. So that's the kind of thing I look at this, and I think it's awesome that you put this together. So thank you for that. So anything else, guys? No?
That's it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Neil. This one's on Rob.
Authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Dimensional Communications Incorporated for audio-visual remodeling of the Port of Bellingham Commission Meeting Room in the amount of $70,759 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $77,835.
So this is John Mulder's project. You guys know John Mulder. He heads up our IT department, and he's retiring in September. And this is his project, and I said he had to come present it. And he said, Rob, I haven't been to a commission meeting in 50
Can we just poke a hole in the wall?
Hey, John.
He's right there.
He's probably watching on YouTube.
I know, it's right there.
So the project is mostly an audio-visual renovation of this room. What comes out of it is better microphones, as you've heard two of the speakers, or couldn't hear two of the speakers today. That problem will be addressed with better mics that pick up an individual's voice with less background noise. And then your mics will all be redone, along with a couple mics over on this table. We will also be putting individual monitors in front of each of you. They'll be recessed into this desk here, but then instead of squinting at a little TV over there, you will have about a 22-inch screen right in front of you to see the PowerPoint displays. The two screens behind us, one of which is failing, this one shuts off after about 2 or 3 hours of use. Those will be replaced with bigger screens, less of a bezel around them. So they'll fit in the wall they're on now and on the brackets they're on now, but it'll just be a slightly crisper and bigger screen. We are going to be cutting off the director's row here after about 2 seats, and it'll be confined to just the port auditor and the port attorney, which both report directly to the commission. The rest of the directors will sit in the common areas. Both of the knee walls there will be cut back to that first pillar on both sides of the room. They'll allow us to put more chairs spread across the room, side to side. The biggest purpose of that is to get more use out of the room in a multi-use scenario where we do trainings in here with 30 or 40 people. There's some other technology stuff that's going to happen, some connections for Mr. Brown over there to allow him to hook up easier to our audio feed and get a crisper audio signal on his recordings. So that's the purpose and the intent of the project. Have I missed anything, Fred?
The podium.
Oh, I'm sorry. The podium will move from its location there to being over approximately where Shirley sits right now, which again allows us to put better seating to view the commission, and then the speaker will stand off to the side to present.
Will this all take place in August?
It'll start after your next commission meeting, July 15th, so it'll essentially start on July 16th. We hope to have it all done by your meeting in August, which is the
Second meeting.
is the 19th, I believe. If we don't have it done then, we have reserved the dome room for that day, and we'll move your meeting to the dome room for that one meeting, and you'll be back in here in September.
You gonna paint it pink, or what's gonna?
Fred and I battled about the colors, and we decided instead of us two fighting about it, we were just going to let Susan pick it, so she'll be deciding whether it's pink or blue.
I see.
So a quick question about this, where we're sitting here. We always spread out like this. You said recessed. How does that work?
So the screen will be way up here.
It'll be up there, okay.
And there'll be a cutout for it to sit down, so you won't lose workspace. You may lose a little bit right up in here, and the screen will sit up we figure about this high at a slant to you.
Sounds good.
Any questions? Anything? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Rob.
A motion by the Board of Commissioners of the Port of Bellingham to amend the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committees, or BIAC, resolution by adopting Resolution Number 1320B, and amend the Technical Airport Advisory Committee, or TAC, resolution by adopting Resolution 1329A.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This item is pretty straightforward. If you recall, back in April, the Commission established the TAC Committee and also restructured the BIAC Committee via resolution. Upon receiving applications for the newly created vacancies on each of the committees, and taking those applications to the committee, we found that there was some oversight on the TAC Committee and the resolution with one of the categories, and that was other airport tenants. And I blame myself for that with the transition from the old BIAC to the new TAC. We neglected to include other airport tenant category and neglected to appoint Mr. Bob Brunkow as a representative. He was appointed to the old BIAC committee back in March by this commission, and again, we failed to transition that position over to the TAC committee. So we're asking for an amendment to the TAC committee resolution to include the category of other airport tenants and Mr. Bob Brunkow. As far as the BIAC recommendation for amendment, we received 7 applications for 8 vacant positions because of the restructuring. We had 2 applications for the same category, and that's for the South County category. Upon review of the applications, the committee asked to recommend to the commission that we actually create a category for Ms. Jeanette Kaiser, who represents the Columbia community. So with that, we are asking that the commission amend the BIAC resolution to add a Columbia community representative position, as well as keep the South County community represented position. The advisory committee feels like the 2 communities are far enough apart and can lend a good perspective on airport topics, and therefore the recommendation for the amendment. Happy to answer any questions.
So they have 7?
There will be 10 on the TAC committee, and I believe 14 on BIAC.
Oh, you've just listed the new ones here. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Dan, South County, geographically, how are you determining South County?
It's fairly arbitrary. Mr. Borum actually lives in the South Hills area. We wanted to try and gain somebody from either the South Hills or Fairhaven district or somewhere around the Lake Padden area.
Okay.
Because we've had a number of complaints, noise complaints from that area.
So when you say South Hills, that's the South Hill neighborhood?
Yes.
All right. Can we make sure we use the word neighborhood rather than a community in describing South Hill and also Columbia? Is that because Columbia here you described as community, but it's Columbia neighborhood? Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And then North County, there's also a North County position, and is that something north of Bellingham?
That's correct.
Okay.
So there are 7, Dan, that we've earmarked, so there's 3 positions open. Is that correct? On the BIAC? There's 5 communities.
Yeah, there's 5 community positions if we accept the Columbia neighborhood as a new category.
Right.
Then there are the elected positions, which is City Council, County Council, City of Ferndale, and Lummi Nation. And then we have
Can't hear you, sorry.
I'm sorry. So we have the elected positions, the Lummi Nation, City Council, County Council, City of Ferndale, and then the others are Whatcom County Tourism, Chamber of Commerce, Environmental Interest.
So 3 of those are the same, you're just adding the 7 new ones.
I'm just adding the one new one, the Columbia neighborhood.
So we voted on the Chamber of Commerce one already?
You have, yes.
Okay. So it's just one addition.
It's one addition for each resolution.
Sounds good to me.
All right, thanks for that, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we're back with more Dan.
A motion for the commission to accept the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, or BIAC, and Technical Airport Advisory Committee, TAC, member recommendations, and appoint the following members to a 3-year term. Representatives to the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee: R. Perry Eskridge, Bellingham Whatcom Tourism; Matthew Pascas, Cliffside Community; Lisa Newlight, North County Community; Guy Grosso, Chamber of Commerce; April Barker, Birchwood Community; Roger Warham, South County Community; Jeanette Kaiser, Columbia Community. Representatives to the Technical Airport Advisory Committee are Robert Engels, Commercial Aviation Representative; Robert French, Pilots Association; Kevin Weatherby, Air Cargo; Jeff Gear, Airport Business; Rob Tobler, Air Traffic Control; and Deb Logan, Ground Transportation Representative.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners, once again. So this item ties in with the resolutions and the creation of the TAC committee, and also the resolution to restructure BIAC. Created some vacancies. So the staff advertised to fill the positions that were created and were vacant, and we received 7 applications for 8 vacant positions for the BIAC, and we received 6 applications for the 7 positions, I believe, for the TAC committee. With the appointment of the 7 members to the BIAC, that will leave 1 position, that's a higher education position, that will be vacant, and we're still recruiting for, and have some potential candidates for that. With the appointment of the 6 members to the TAC committee, that will fill all the vacant positions. We'll have a full committee there. Each of the applications went for review in front of each of the committees on June 12th. And as you see before you, as part of this motion, the advisory committees are recommending appointment of each of these members. I've invited the new members to this commission meeting, and we have 2 members who showed up. One, Mr. Eskridge, who's in the back there.
Hello.
And someone who needs no introduction, I'm sure, is Mr. Pascas, who's
Hey, man.
sitting over there as well. So with that, we would ask for the appointment of these members to the committees.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. I know it can be a pain in the butt, and this is a step and not the final destination. So, this is, I'm assuming that in the coming years that we'll have to revisit this in some way, but I think it's a good step, so I'm pretty excited about it. And welcome, Mr. Eskridge, and hello, Matt. It's good to see you again. And no discussion on that one, then all in favor?
Just nice to have what we have. That's great.
Yep,
It
awesome.
really is.
All right. So all in favor? Aye.
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 None opposed? Carried. One more time, Dan.
Thank you.
A motion to approve the 2014 Bellingham International Airport tariff schedule effective July 1, 2014.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon once again, Commissioners. This motion is to increase the license to operate fee for the hotel motel shuttle operators. At the May 20th Commission meeting, Commission asked staff to revisit the fee structure and look at the hotel motel fee to see if we should be charging a fee. Now, there's some history here. It goes back to November 2012 when staff presented a fee structure to the Commission to break down the license to operate agreement into 5 different categories. That's the hotel motel operators, taxi cab operators, limousine operators for hire shuttles, and there's one more, town car operators. With that, also created the ground transportation service operator requirements, and it updated our license to operate agreement for each of these 5 categories. Now, in February 2013, staff also brought in front of the Commission an increase to each of these categories to help generate some revenue to construct a ground transportation island or a capital project to construct a ground transportation island. And at that Commission meeting, the increase in fees was tabled. Then on March 20th, with the presentation of the tariff scheduled to increase fees for parking lot, or actually decrease for the economy lots and increase for the main lot, Commission asked staff to revisit the hotel motel fee structure, and that's what's being presented in front of you today. I went back and looked at what we presented back in February of 2013. And at that time, we were asking the Commission to increase the hotel motel fee structure to $50 a month or $600 per year. We have 5 hotel motel operators that are signed up under our license to operate agreement today. And in effect, it would only increase our revenues by $3,000 a year. So it's not a significant adjustment to our revenue. But with that, I am asking the Commission to, or staff is recommending Commission to approve this airport tariff schedule, which would increase the hotel motel operator fee. I take any questions.
Does this include off-site parking shuttle?
Now, this is just an increase to the hotel motel shuttle operators.
So when you say shuttle operator, it's just hotel motel?
That's
not
right, just
not
the one
parking.
category.
And the off-site parking shuttles are paying how much
$25 per month.
compared to 50 for these other folks?
That's correct.
I have the same question. So why 50 versus the 25?
It just doesn't make sense.
Because when this fee structure was presented in February 2013, the staff was recommending a standardization across the board for all 5, with the exception of the hotel motel operators, because of the amount of revenue that was being generated by the other operators versus hotel motel is more of a courtesy for hotel motel. The off-site airport parking lot operators, the for-hire shuttles, limousine operators, taxi cab operators actually generate some revenue from the passengers that go through the airport. Hotel motel was more of a courtesy, and at that time the advisory committee recommended that we have a lower rate for the hotel motel operators.
Okay. So they're not the courtesy on the 5 categories, and looking at the courtesy hotel motel shuttle operators, not apples to apples when you compare it against any other shuttle operator.
That's correct.
Okay.
I guess I'm confused when we mention here off-site airport parking lot shuttle operators are going to pay $50, or are they at $25?
There's no recommendation for adjustment to the current fee for the off-site airport parking lot shuttle operators. It's only a recommendation to adjust the fee for the courtesy hotel motel shuttle operators. If you look on the airport tariff schedule, which is the last page, you'll see the 5 categories broken down under the license to operate fees. So it's that first category that's being presented as an adjustment today.
How
So-
are the numbers holding up on the ground transportation operations? Are we have as many operators, or what's the deal?
Yeah, the number hasn't changed much.
It hasn't changed
over the
much.
last year, no.
We've lost a few percentage points, but it's still holding well on the ground transportation.
For the percentage of in-plane passengers, yes, that has decreased over the last several months compared to last year's numbers, but we're still seeing the same number of operators for ground transportation services.
Okay.
So if you have a limousine for an off-site parking, you're going to be charged $100 annually. Or if you use a shuttle bus, you're going to be charged $25 a month. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So there's a difference between a limousine, because there's quote unquote limousine service versus the actual vehicle, because some limousine services don't operate what we would assume as a limousine, like a car.
Right. The limousine service is actually regulated by the state. There's an RCW, and they have to comply with a stringent type of vehicle, the way that they operate, how they're decaled, so on. And those services are strictly limousine services. I think I know what you're getting at, is the I-5 off-site airport parking lot. They actually operate town cars, and recently the state has come down on them because they're acting as a taxi cab, yet they were categorized through the state as a town car, so they weren't acting appropriately. So they've changed their category with the state. They are now actually taxi cabs operating a service to and from the off-site airport parking.
Wouldn't an off-site shuttle use the airport, parking shuttle use the airport a lot more than a hotel shuttle?
Yes,
Yet the
believe so.
hotel shuttle pays $25 a month more.
that's correct. So let me give you some more. Let me give you some more history. So in February
3% annual.
In February 2013, staff was recommending that the fee structure for taxi cab operators, limousine operators, for-hire shuttle bus operators, and off-site airport parking lot shuttle operators all be $50 per month, plus a 5% fee for monthly sales. And that way, each of the category operators, whether they're operating a taxi cab from an off-site airport parking lot or whether they were operating an off-site airport parking lot shuttle, would have to pay the same fee. That motion and that action item was tabled by this commission and has not been revisited until now. And this was because of the commission suggestion on May 20th that we're revisiting the hotel motel shuttle operator category.
We're just increasing one category,
Yeah, that's it, as far as I see.
and that seems fair to you gentlemen. You two were here when the last one went up. I was not on the commission.
As long as you don't own one of those units, it's okay. Mike owns two.
I think this is almost a housekeeping sort of thing, because this was one category that was being charged zero, but providing similar service, or in some cases the same service as others that were paying. But the bigger question of these rates overall, that's, I don't know, we haven't actually scheduled a conversation, but that's up for further discussion as we go down the road.
Yeah, I'd be happy to revisit the other categories.
Yeah, I bet you would.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm just messing with you, Dan. So, are you good on that one? All right. So we will be talking about this again in the future, but this is just to get
I'm
that
sure
one
we will.
category adjusted.
No doubt.
Yeah, all right. Anything further on this one? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Zank.
Thank you.
And environmental, please.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a consent decree with the Washington State Department of Ecology for the GP West Pulp and Tissue Remedial Action Unit, pending no substantive changes to the draft consent decree.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This draft consent decree that's before you for consideration is similar in many ways to the Cornwall Avenue landfill consent decree that was approved by the Commission at our May 20th meeting. It's unique. It's similar in the form and function of the legal document in that it settles our liability with the state for environmental cleanup, which we'll talk about in a little more detail here in a moment. It's also similar in the magnitude of the milestone that it represents as we move forward from investigation and study to an Department of Ecology decision that will allow us to do on-the-ground cleanup, and specifically at the former Georgia Pacific Mill property, which is a major component of our redevelopment waterfront district in itself. It's different in lots of ways, though, in the sense that it's its own unique MODCA cleanup site, has its own unique geology and hydrogeology and contaminants of concern, and the cleanup action plan that Ecology has selected is different than the Cornwall Avenue landfill. So just in a little bit of orientation here, I passed around a few handouts here because some of the maps that I've pulled out are from the existing documents. They don't translate perfectly to this. Maybe it'll be much better when we do the remodel of this room. But you have handouts there that show these maps in a little more detail, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. This is just to show a little bit of orientation on the area that we'll be talking about. On the left-hand side is a map from the Waterfront District Sub-Area Plan, and that is the planning document between the port and city. And this Model Toxics Control Act or MODCA cleanup site, the GP West site, falls completely within the Waterfront District. And it's a 74-acre site shown on the right-hand photo here, outlined in black. The yellow portion on the right-hand side here is the area called the Pulp and Tissue Remedial Action Unit, or RAU. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail, but that is the northern 31 acres that this agreement, this consent decree and cleanup action plan apply to. The remainder of the GP West site is going through a cleanup decision with the Department of Ecology on a separate track. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail, but that just provides a little orientation on where this area applies. So where we're at right now, or how we got to where we're at, a lot of work's been done to date. We've worked with the Department of Ecology since 2009 under an agreed order to do a remedial investigation and feasibility study, or RIFS. That's the study that defines what contamination is there, where it's at, kind of what kind of contamination it is, where it's going. The feasibility study is the FS, and that then says what can you do about it? How can you clean that contamination up, and how can you address those exposure pathways? So we started that process in 2009. Based on the first round of information that we got from that remedial investigation, we amended the agreed order in 2011 to initiate some interim actions or some early cleanup actions on the site. We did a removal of petroleum contamination in the northern portion of the site by the Whatcom Waterway and the clarifier in the Bunker C area. And then we also started a mercury cleanup on the southern portion of the site, and we're just currently in the process of wrapping that interim action up. We did a second amendment to the agreed order in last year of 2013, and that was based on the remedial investigation. We decided the southern portion of the site where we were underway with the mercury cleanup was a lot more complex. It was going to take a little bit longer to finish that interim action, but in the meantime, this northern portion of the site, the pulp and tissue area, was defined, it was ready to go, and it was kind of waiting on the southern portion to catch up. So the Department of Ecology agreed that it would make some sense to split these into these two units, and we could move the northern portion of the site forward through the cleanup process, and that's how we got to where we are right now, and which will allow us to do the cleanup and the redevelopment on an expedited schedule. And the site-wide remedial investigation was issued for public review and comment and finalized in 2013 as well. So this is a figure that shows the just to illustrate that complexity, the difference between the northern and the southern portions of the site. This was from the remedial investigation that was finalized last year. You can see the pulp and tissue area here on the right-hand side is the northern portion of the site. And it's relatively straightforward as far as contamination goes. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on what these boxes mean, but these kind of show where the contamination is. This is the bunker C area. Some of that cleanup has already been done under an interim action. And then the remainder were these just these groundwater plumes. There were contamination where none of the groundwater contamination was actually reaching Bellingham Bay, and it was relatively straightforward portion of the site. The southern portion of the site has a lot more going on there. As you can see, you have a mercury contamination, a low pH, a high pH caustic plume groundwater issue. We have some petroleum contamination, and so it was a much more complex portion of the site. So that's how we decided to move these forward in separate tracks.
So, Brian, I would love to see this in the hands of every concerned citizen that's interested in what's going on the waterfront. I know that's not something we can do, but everybody look at this, please. Quick question for you about the mercury. The brown dash lines on this image are unrestricted screening, so you're essentially going to look for everything in there. But then the brown area right in the middle of the log pond, what's the difference between that mercury contamination and the other areas that are surrounded by the dash lines?
I have to look at. I think
It says industrial screening level on that brown block.
Yeah, so this is the former ChemFix area, which was an area where Georgia Pacific in the 70s, I believe, took some contaminated soil and stabilized it with cement and placed it in this low depression in the middle of the site. That was done under an agreed order with Ecology at the time. And it has a elevated mercury concentrations that are higher than an industrial soil cleanup level. Those aren't really the applicable cleanup numbers, though. This is the first kind of screening levels that you look at. Department of Ecology then determines what the true cleanup level will be, and most of those are much lower than either industrial or unrestricted for soil, because they look at the pathway from soil to groundwater to sediment, and that's more conservative than any of the other industrial or unrestricted. So it was a way to for us to start looking at where areas that we need to look at in the feasibility study. So when we go forward on a feasibility study, we'll know where we need to address those individual areas.
The word was out that there was a visible mercury plume. Is that correct?
Well, the interim action that we undertook, and that we're just wrapping up right now, was specifically designed to remove visible elemental mercury from the ground. We did that. There's still some more work to be done there as a final cleanup, but we removed, I don't remember the exact amounts right off the top of my head, but we removed a significant amount of visible elemental mercury that we stabilized and disposed of off-site at hazardous waste landfill in Oregon.
No, that was all around the cell building, all right?
Right. Yeah, all on the southern portion of the site.
So
just really as a quick note, this document will be available to everybody. It's going to be issued for public comment. It should be available on the Department of Ecology's website here this week. And so we've got scheduled that I'll talk about here in a moment, but this is available for public review and consumption.
So a person who might have little background information would grab this, and this assumption that could be made that this brown block in the middle, it's just going to stay the way it is because it meets some sort of industrial standard. That's not necessarily true. This may or may not be dug up and hauled away.
Right. The industrial versus unrestricted is the kind of a not the appropriate use of the cleanup levels. Really, what we would look at is that material impacting groundwater that then impacts the bay or sediment. And if that's not the case and you can contain it, that is a viable cleanup option. Depends on what we want to do out there as far as some of our land use decisions, but that's something that we look at in the feasibility study for the southern portion of the site, which is secondary to what we're talking about today.
Exactly. Thank you for letting me
It is
take you down
important.
that trail.
So to focus then on the northern portion of the site, just in a little more detail, this figure here shows where the pulp and tissue area has identified areas that need to be addressed in a cleanup action that informs then the cleanup decision that the Department of Ecology made. And you can see here along the Whatcom Waterway here, this orange and blue areas where we have petroleum contamination. There is also some low pH or acidic soils here over by the acid plant that also has a low pH groundwater plume, but we have groundwater data along the shoreline that shows it's not reaching the bay. And then we have some dissolved metals in the groundwater here kind of over by the tile tanks as well. The one other factor that we have out here is that we've assumed that in the kind of overall area where there's kind of this purple shading is that there are a variety of industrial contaminants like PAHs that are likely above a very stringent direct contact cleanup number. So we've assumed that all of the soil in this footprint has to be addressed in some fashion or another. And that's usually done through just capping and containing and making sure there's not a direct handling contact with that. That can be done through a variety of ways, which I'll talk about here in a moment. So this document is the consent decree and cleanup action plan. The other document that will be issued along with that is by the Department of Ecology for public comment is the feasibility study. Generally, they're issued together as an RIFS, but because we broke the site up, we issued the RI individually last year, and now we'll also be issuing this feasibility study. And it did evaluate a variety of alternatives. There were 4 alternatives altogether. Alternative 1 was removal of additional bunker C contamination and capping throughout the site, and monitoring of those groundwater plumes to ensure that they're shrinking or changing and not expanding. And then each alternative built on those. I'd be happy to go into detail on them, but basically they built more and more protection or more aggressive cleanup on top of that, with the 4th alternative being full removal of the entire remedial action unit of soil down to 15 feet and placing it back. It's kind of a bookend extreme example of what you would need to do, but it is a viable cleanup alternative. The costs associated with those ranged between $5.7 million to $7.6 million, with the additional full removal being $91 million to remove all that material. So
Yeah, can we go back to that
Sure.
slide? So alternative 1, a person would conclude that you spend $5.7 million up front, and it protects the critters and it protects people from whatever's there.
Mhm.
And then there's the institutional controls. So this is a long-term.
Yeah, anytime that you leave any contamination in place through a containment remedy of some sort or the other, because this would apply to the Cornwall landfill as well, ecology requires some kind of institutional control or restrictive covenant on that goes along with the property kind of in perpetuity. If you're not removing it or destroying the contamination, there needs to be assurances that the cleanup, which is containment, would be viable in perpetuity. So that could be provisions for if the cap is disturbed, how would it be replaced following a cleanup? Or what are the notification requirements to the Department of Ecology if a project that is going to penetrate the cap is proposed by the port or developer? So those are the kind of institutional controls that we're referring to.
So I don't get to go to Department of Ecology and say, I want something different. I'm going to assume they're choosing from these alternatives. But it seems to me that it might, given the difference in value here, 5.7 versus the alternative 3, 7.6, it's pretty close. It seems like you might be saving yourself a little trouble by going a little further than the alternative 1.
So with that, with the way that the Department of Ecology evaluates these, and in the feasibility study is a cost benefit analysis. So this kind of sets that up a little bit, and really MODCA, the law says between comparing those, you choose the one that's maximum or permanent to the maximum extent practicable. And so they look at all those variables and then build a cost benefit ratio, and then you pick the the one that has the lowest cost for the greatest benefit. And that process kicked out alternative number 1 as the most permanent to the maximum extent. You're right, alternative 3 would do more, but actually the majority of the changes in these alternatives is something that basically speeds up the cleanup. So it reduces the restoration time frame the most. Aside from full removal of all the contaminants, the treatment of the groundwater plume would just speed up the reduction of the plume size. But because there's currently no real exposure, there's not reaching the bay, nobody's drinking the water, there's no fish that live in groundwater. I mean, the actual benefit is very limited on doing a faster cleanup. So this restoration time frame is a component of that, and that's really what the majority of the changes between the alternatives are, is you could get the cleanup completed faster. But it doesn't remove much more than the full removal.
So for a second, let's discuss that, say the groundwater, whatever's in that, to make it acid, okay. So how does it affect future development, though?
And there's a few things I'll talk about here in a second too.
Okay.
There's a lot of work went into this document that is different than the Cornwall consent decree, which includes a model restrictive covenant, which is a example of what the restrictions will be on the site that will go along with each piece of property for, as long as the contaminants are there. There's also a contaminated materials management plan that is part of this consent decree, which provides the background and the guidance on how each project, when it goes through development, needs to handle material. So there's a flow chart that says you'll notify ecology. Is the material contaminated? Yes, no. If so, what do you do with it? How does it get managed? And so there's a lot of predictability that's built into this. And some of the only real restrictions are, if you want to reuse material on site, you can, but you have to cap it just like it is now, or like it's going to be. If you have there's restrictions on drinking water extraction, but you couldn't do that anyway. There's a few restrictions on how to install utilities through the groundwater plume. So if utilities are cutting through the groundwater plume, you don't want to create a permeable kind of pathway. So ecology is requiring that you backfill that with just in the sections that are through the groundwater plume, with impermeable backfill. So other than that, there's really very few restrictions or limitations on the development. There's some notification and planning, but a lot of it is built into this document that really kind of provides a lot of predictability.
So much of it is capped.
So just to wrap up, I'm happy to keep discussing this in more detail if you like. The ecology selected cleanup, which is an exhibit to the consent decree, is alternative 1, which includes a focused removal of petroleum contamination in the northern portion of the site, similar to what we did at the Bunker C. There is long-term monitoring of the 2 groundwater plumes, and to ensure that those are indeed shrinking in size and attenuating. And then there's capping throughout the whole RAU. So different kinds of capping could include existing foundations and pavement, new pavement, or even fill material, soil fill material of a certain thickness. And that would be designed in much more detail in the future next steps. So as I indicated previously, this is essentially a legal document that is a settlement between the state and the port, as long as we agree to implement the exhibit, the cleanup action plan, which is an exhibit. It'll be entered into the Whatcom County Supreme Court, and it includes a covenant not to sue in return for the cleanup selected by ecology. There's a number of exhibits that I talked about. I think we talked about this in a little detail already. Rich Davis and Holly Stafford are here from Schmelik, Sicken, and Davis. If you have any specific legal questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer those. And our next steps include issuing this draft feasibility study and consent decree for public review and comment. The Department of Ecology will issue that. They anticipate starting that process July 14th. Because it is a complex document and there's a lot of material in this, that they're going to issue it for 45 days. Typically it's a 30-day comment period, but they feel like there's a fair amount to review here. Ecology will review and respond to those comments, and then the consent decree will be filed in Whatcom County Superior Court pending no substantive changes. We'll start our detailed design and engineering after that process. Then we'll hire a consultant to do the engineering and design. And then really from that point forward, after we do the construction, which could start as early as next year, it would be your typical kind of brownfield redevelopment with material management and ongoing monitoring. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So both ecology and the port's recommendation is going to be alternative one?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Brian, there's two things that I'm very interested in with all of these cleanups, and this one specifically because we're talking with Harcourt about this properties. One, it's got to be protected, which it seems like all of these alternatives will provide that. But the other part of it is preserving the value of the land into the future. So what's the process that you guys go through to say, okay, it's going to be protective over here, but in the future it might cost more, or it's going to be protective and in the future it won't cost less? What's sort of the process you go through to ensure that the property itself has value, a decade or 2 decades out?
Some of that I would defer to Rob and Shirley perhaps a little bit, but or Mike, but just from the protectiveness, at the bare minimum, all alternatives that are carried forward under MODCA have to meet this minimum threshold requirement, and so all the alternatives are protective if they're implemented correctly. All the work that we've put into kind of trying to provide this predictability also is designed to help provide that long-term, assurance that there's not a cleanup component that future purchasers or developers will have to address that isn't already defined in this. But as far as the long-term valuation, if anybody else wants to jump in, that's fine.
And I'll throw this extra thought in there. And the reason I'm asking is that it would be awesome if the public can recover all the investment it's ever put into this, which is probably impossible, but as much as possible would be the best case scenario. So reducing any future impacts that would push the value of that land down, but doing it now, I think, is the right thing to do now.
Yeah, Commissioner McCauley, it's a very good point, and we've thought about this a lot. What we're trying to do is take a public brownfields property and prepare it for redevelopment by both the public sector and the private sector. So we're trying to find that right balance of how much public investment you put into this property to make sure that, first of all, it is a protective cleanup, and second of all, that it can be redeveloped according to the vision. What we've got here, I think, is one that meets that standard of being practical and balanced. What it does is it puts a certain amount of investment into the property by the public, and that includes the port, the city, Department of Ecology. And what it does then on the other side is it makes Harcourt, for example, or any other private developer have to be smart about how they develop the property. So we've built something here that's very typical of a brownfield redevelopment. We have a material management plan that is pretty clear and consistent with other brownfield sites. And what it does is it puts a little bit of the onus on Harcourt to be thoughtful about how they design building foundations, for example, on this kind of property, so that they can minimize their private investment but still meet their development goals. If we were to spend another $90 million on this to get it clean, that'd be great for the private developer, but I think it would be a disservice to the public.
So when you're discussing this internally, and you see, okay, ecology is going to be okay with the alternative one, it's protective, right? They don't necessarily care if Whatcom County's taxpayers get their investment back. They just want to be protective of the environment and the people that are in contact with this property. Is that reasonable to say like that?
Well, like Brian was saying, the disproportionate cost analysis is designed so that their decision making is based on this same balancing act. There's 7 or 8 different criteria that are built into that analysis, including implementability and cost and that sort of thing.
So I guess sort of drilling down into my question, Department of Ecology says, okay, we'll go with alternative one. We know what that costs. And this is, I think you can apply this to everything that's going on down there. But the Port of Bellingham may decide that alternative 2 or 3 or full removal is a better outcome in the future, just because we know that whatever these unforeseen things that might happen, we'd like to forestall those things happening now. We can do that, right? We don't have to settle on ecology as alternative one. And so by suggesting that because all you guys have already discussed this, you've already gone through all the different scenarios that might push up the cost for a future developer as they go through this, as they go through digging up the site or driving piling or whatever it is they have to do. So let's say in this case we're saving $1 million or $2 million now, but it ends up costing potential developers, $5, $6, $10 million down the road. They're just going to negotiate the price of the land down based on, whatever they think might be there, or maybe the first developer goes in, sees a big problem, and then others are going to come in and say, no, we might find a problem as well, and they're going to continue to push it down.
That's definitely one of the things we look at. The numbers don't look like the examples you just presented, though.
So how do you guys decide that we're safe, with this, the first alternative, so that future developers aren't going to come in and go, no, we're pushing the price down. So instead of getting, $25 a foot, we're down at $4.
We believe the negotiation on pushing the price down is going to come from industrial artifacts on the site, not necessarily related to contamination or cleanup exercises.
Okay.
I think that's where the push is going to come from. Developers are going to say, hey, it's going to cost X much. We don't know what it's going to cost to drive a pile down there because we don't know what we're going to hit as we're driving that pile. Whereas the cleanup is kind of a separate deal. And one of the reasons we chose Harcourt is they have experience dealing with brownfield sites, and we would hope that the developers we deal with in the future have experience dealing with brownfield sites, because they're going to understand that the ongoing monitoring costs are ours, and they're going to understand that there's no real difference in cost between them and any of these alternates. There really isn't. I mean, a full removal versus ongoing monitoring doesn't matter to a real estate developer because it doesn't affect their construction costs. But the industrial artifacts, where there's a building they run into as they drive, that does affect it. So I would argue that this is kind of irrelevant to a developer that knows what he's doing. Maybe someone who comes in here who doesn't understand brownfields might have some concerns on this, but I think the guys that get it will be just fine.
All right. So we're going to be protective of the land value as well by doing this. And the only reason I'm kind of asking this now, it seems like it's kind of late in the game, I know. It's our first step, right? The first actual getting it done. I think after this, everything should move into a pattern of familiarity, and it'll be a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's a very timely concern because it's what we're negotiating right now with Harcourt. So,
thank you, Mike.
My concern is once ecology signs off on it, and we accept that, and it goes to court, and Harcourt gets in there and finds that there's some contamination that we didn't know about, we can't go back to the state or ecology. It's between us and Harcourt. Is that correct?
well, we can always go back to ecology and ask for more MATCA funds. So that's always a possibility. It's never totally closed out.
That's true. Brian, maybe you could describe how many borings you've taken out there.
Well, maybe I'm just reading this here, not to sue in return for cleanup selected by ecology. That's what kind of scares me. This goes to Whatcom County Superior Court.
Right.
Yeah,
And we agree not to sue. Someone's agreeing not to sue here. I assume it's.
that's where ecology, the state's agreeing not to sue us in exchange for implementing the cleanup action plan that's the exhibit to this consent decree. So,
Contaminated site, they could sue us to clean it up.
Okay.
Instead, they've said you implement our consent decree and we'll agree not to sue us.
right.
Thank you.
Yep. And one other quick one to note that I forgot here is that from the fiscal impact, just to review that on the action memo, that there's not a direct, as with Cornwall, there's not a direct fiscal impact from this decision, except for in the consent decree we're agreeing to pay ecology oversight fees. On the other hand, by agreeing to implement this cleanup, we're agreeing to the $5.7 million cleanup action, which will come forth in individual public works contracts once we bid that. But it's not a direct impact, but it will have down the road fiscal impacts. And it is a site that is covered by our AIG insurance policy, with the remaining 50% of eligible costs covered by an existing MATCA grant as well.
Just a quick thank you for whoever decided to pull these two parts apart. Thank you, because I think this one's getting to move a little bit quicker and in a good way. So
Yeah,
appreciate all your hard work on that. So all in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioners.
Thanks, Brian. One more, Steve?
A motion to approve a renewal and modification of lease agreement between the Port of Bellingham and Rainier Petroleum Corporation doing business as Maxim Petroleum or Rainier.
Thanks, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This lease and operating agreement, of course, deals with the fueling facility down at the Bellingham Cruise Terminal. That facility primary mission is to fuel the Alaska Marine highway vessels, and its secondary mission, of course, is to fill other vessels that may come in and need that refueling service in Bellingham Bay. The staff earlier this spring went out with a request for proposals for a fueler, a service provider, and we received two proposals to that request. Rainier, of course, is one of them, and also Yorkston. Yep. And we did a pretty thorough vetting of their submittals, and it came to the conclusion that Rainier was definitely the leader in that competition. This will mark the fourth 5-year agreement with Rainier for that service and lease contract down there at the cruise terminal. The fiscal side of this transaction, basically, they'll start paying $1,100 a month for the actual fuel facility, which increases 2% annually. You can see where that's going to generate about $63,000 in adjusted revenue over the 5-year period based on a 3-net discount. One of the significant things in this contract with Rainier was that they came to the table with three-quarters of a cent increase in the gallon paid to the port for non-AMH vessels. That was important in the selection process as well. A couple other details on this was that we tightened up some of the operating conditions under the agreement. We want Rainier to do a more consistent job providing us with the reports on the condition of the actual physical plant, so we can keep a closer eye on how that's holding up over the next 5 years. So with that, that pretty much sums it up. Any questions I'd be happy to answer.
Dan?
Rainier's a local company, as Yorkston is.
No, Rainier is based out of Seattle. I think they're on Harbor Island as their head corporation. Is that right, Dave?
Did this go out for bid?
This we did out, Commissioner Roberts. We did a request for proposals, okay, which went out in the Herald, and then the staff personally contacted all the local fuelers as well. So Yorkston, Reisner, which are the two main distributors of fuel in the area. So.
I really don't like not seeing a local business get the business.
Right. Yeah.
And so can you go in a little more detail on what the real difference was if it wasn't a bid process?
Certainly. There were really three components. There was the pricing, there was the environmental compliance, and their history of over-the-water fueling. And Yorkston put in a very strong proposal. It was not an easy decision for staff to select Rainier, but the facts are the facts, and Rainier just has a much stronger in terms of the number of times they handle fuel over water and the amount of incidents where they get reported to ecology. It's just really comparing two different types of fruit. Rainier Maximum is quite a bit larger corporation. They handle a much more fuel. They offer to pay us more per gallon, per every gallon of fuel delivered to the boats that are non-MHS.
Not getting too deep into the weeds, what was the difference in that price?
Well, basically, the minimum was a point for the AMHS fuel flowing fee. We held that steady at $0.015. Is that right, Dave? And then on the on the non-AMHS vessel fueling, it was at 2 cents per gallon. And Yorkton came in with that as a base with no incentive beyond that. That was a minimum requirement of the proposal. Whereas Rainier came in with another 3/4 cents on top of that. Yeah.
So the difference in their proposals was 3/4 cents
Per gallon.
per gallon
Right.
to the port.
Right. So in other words, staff had a choice to say, well, we can take a local outfit and they're going to pay us 2 cents, okay, on the non-AMHS vessels, okay, or we can take brand X, which is going to pay us more money per gallon fueled. I mean, that's a business decision. Okay, that was one thing. They had a better record with handling fuel. They had more. Their number of over-the-water fuelings was far greater than what Yorkston had put together. Yorkston's a very strong company, there's no question about that, but they just didn't rise to that level that we thought was important in this particular RFP and agreement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question. Oh, who negotiates the flowage fee to the AMHS? Is that Rainier with AMHS? Is that us with our contract with AMHS?
The Maritime Division has the extensive discussions with Alaska on that topic, and they kind of take that part, and they recognize that the highway system is not, financially robust, and so they try to keep that in mind when they negotiate that.
You said 3/4 cents a gallon difference.
Right.
How much money are we talking? How many gallons are we doing?
Yeah. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Maybe
Dave?
About 400,000 gallons per year. So multiply that by that.
Is that non-AMHS, so 400,000 per year?
That's total between non-AMHS and AMHS.
Okay.
Yeah.
What percentage is non?
Close to half.
Yeah.
We're just a hair less.
What's the math there?
So 200,000 at 3/4 cent?
And the other side of this, if I may, is that
$1,500.
yeah. But the other side that really should be emphasized here is that Rainier has the experience of doing this over time, on the West Coast, entire West Coast. Okay, this is what they do, and we felt that Yorktown, being very strong locally, just did not have that depth of experience, and we have to be sure that the Alaska Marine Highway System is going to get fuel when they get in here.
Yorkton fills most efficient boats and stuff around here,
They
don't they?
do a lot of over-the-dock fueling, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you called out in your description here the safety and environmental compliance history, the safety record and environmental compliance history, because that's a big thing.
It's very important to staff.
Because we've had issues in Blaine with fuel flowage there. So.
I think if I remember correctly, Dave, is that they had 4,000 over-the-water fueling operations in 2013. This is West Coast, okay, and they had, what, 2?
It was actually McAvoy, not Yorkston.
Excuse me. Yeah.
McAvoy had 225 over-the-water fuelings a year locally. Rainier, within the Puget Sound, has over 4,000 per year. So it's a substantial difference.
You said McAvoy.
Yeah,
It wasn't Yorkston.
No, no.
It wasn't Yorkston that was.
Reisner, Yorkston, yeah, I apologize. Reisner, Yorkston, McAvoy were all contacted to submit, and McAvoy was the only one that came in with a submittal.
Dan, you raised an interesting point, because that was something that I've long been trying to understand. How does somebody break in, right? Because there's a lot of small businesses that we just tend to not work with because they don't have that strength in their history or whatever. And I know it can be tough.
We had that conversation, Commissioner McCauley. Really, really did. And because they presented well, they had a good team. But the director of Maritime was, he wanted to be sure that we had a consistent, known fueler take care of these boats.
Were there only two people that put in proposals? McAvoy and Rainier?
Yeah, McAvoy and Rainier. We actually were expecting more. But
and Yorkston didn't put one in?
No. We reached out to Yorkston and McAvoy and Reisner, now that I get my story straight. And actually, was it Yorkston, I think, submitted in the previous RFP. Isn't that right? Yeah, so.
It was APP was the other one.
Yeah, APP was and also out of Seattle. But we make an effort to contact the local fuelers. We want them to participate, but we've got to do what makes the most sense for the port and its customers, so. Okay.
Well, yes, I would like to bring up something that has been a concern for a long time, talking about fueling, it brought to mind, and wondering how much or what kind of scrutiny you've given to the fueling situation for boats in Blaine. Has anybody looked at that, or?
He misspoke there, that's Blaine Harbor.
Thank you.
Blaine Harbor.
Okay. You know, Commissioner Jurgensen, I'm really not involved with that operational side of things up there. That would probably be a question for Dan Stahl or.
Yeah, I didn't
his
know if
group.
you'd heard anything or had any information, or if anybody does. It's that hose that hangs
Got anything
down
new, Shirley?
20 feet to the boats. And
We don't have anything new to report, Commissioners, but we'll find out and put something in the update for you.
so it's accident waiting to happen.
All right. Let's take a vote on this one. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for jumping in on that, Shirley. That's it. Any new business, gentlemen? Nothing? Nothing? So I'm inviting everybody in this room to come to the GP Pier because Marie's doing her darndest. Where's Neil? Neil's gone. Get that open again this year. So thanks again, Rob. I appreciate that.
I'll be there.
All right. Are you coming on the 3rd to help set up?
But I'll be there by 9 o'clock on the 4th.
Sounds good. Anything else from anybody at all? Nothing? All right. We're all done. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I won't be in town.
That's okay. I wrote Sheila into it. She's like, what?
Set up.